All right, up until now, we've been able to solve quadratic equations by factoring. But today we're going to explore what happens when you can't factor the trinomial. And you can't simply take the square root of both sides. I'm going to take this section and I'm going to teach it today and tomorrow because it's long, it's very in-depth, and if I go too fast, you'll be completely lost. Okay? So we're going to go slow. We're going to learn how to complete the square and what that means to complete the square. You may not see the whole thing culminate and come to an end today, but tomorrow when we put it all together, it will make sense. The first thing is this. When we are completing the square, we are going off of the square root property. Now, we've already worked problems like this where there was only an x squared term. And let's just refresh our memory. What do we do if you've got x squared equals something? You take the square root of both sides of the equation. Now, anytime you take the square root on both sides of the equation, automatically that means that you must show two things. And what are they? The positive and negative of this square root of 25. Because when I plug either one of those back in and square them, it will give me positive 25. So the answer here is x is equal to plus 5 or minus 5, right? Okay, well, we're going to try to make our equation similar to this so that we get to this point and we can finish it off and solve the equation. Now, this is our goal. We want to take a perfect square trinomial and factor it down so that I have a term being squared by itself on one side of the equal sign and everything else on the other side. And when I get to this point, all I have to do is take the square root of both sides. Okay, so this is my ultimate goal. Now let's just go ahead and say, okay, let's say we got to this point. Now how are we going to solve these equations? Well, just like the last one, if it was x squared equals 25, we took the square root, right? Because this entire group is in parentheses, I've got to first undo square, which is doing what? Taking the square root of both sides. Just like the last slide, when I do that, what happens to the square root and the square? They go away. And so you're simply left with x plus 3. Now I took the square root of both sides, so automatically, Parker, what do I have to show? Plus or minus 5. Now, this may look confusing, but it's very easy. You want to solve for x. So you want to get x by itself. At this point, how do I get x by itself? I subtract 3 from both sides. And watch what I'm going to have. Now, as long as those two numbers are like terms, you can put them together. Because x is either negative 3 plus 5, which would give me what? 2. Or negative 3 minus 5, which would give me what? Negative 8. So my two solutions are 2 and negative 8. Now, just to show you that that's true, let's try it out. Starting back here, from the beginning. If x is equal to 2, 2 plus 3 is 5, and what is 5 squared? 25. If x is equal to negative 8, negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5, and what's negative 5 squared? 25. Okay? So our goal is to get to this point. Right now, we're just going to work some from this point to get this to where it's just second nature. We don't even have to think about it. First thing you're going to do, Nick, is what? Nick Lejeune.
Put in the square root.
Okay? Take the square root of both sides. Hurley, what do I have on the left?
6.
That's the right,
X
the other
minus
left.
2.
Okay? X minus 2 equals, Sean, what's left on the other side?
6.
Just 6?
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus 6. That is very, 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 very important. You've got to have the plus or minus. Aaron, what am I going to do next?
X equals
Very good. You're going to add 2 to both sides, and so you'll have x is equal to 2 plus or minus 6. Now, can you add or put those 2 and 6 together? Yes. So, John Bostic, what are my possible x's? 8 and negative 4. Because 2 plus 6 is 8, and 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Very good. If you plug that back in to check, 8 minus 2 is 6, and 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6, and that squared is 36. Okay? Now remember, this is what we are trying to do when we can't factor. There are 3 ways to solving quadratic equations. You can factor, you can do this, complete the square, which we're not doing the whole process yet, or, and we're going to learn this next week, you have the quadratic formula, okay, when things are crazy. All right, let's do another one. Let's see if you can do this on your own. And yes, this one is a little bit more difficult, but I want you to think. I don't want to spoon feed you. Caleb, what's involved in here? Did you work it yet? Write it down. Lamar, what do you have in your answer?
Imaginary numbers.
No, there's no imaginary numbers. You have a radical in your answer. Okay, because you can't simplify the square root of 10. When we take the square root of both sides, we have x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus. Square root of 10 is the square root of 10. It's got a 2 and a 5 in it, and none of that can come out from under the radical. So I have to leave it as the square root of 10. Yes?
Do you have to put plus or minus?
You have to put plus or minus.
But you didn't take the square root of 10.
We did take the square root. It's just we didn't figure out exactly what it is. We're just leaving it as a radical. Okay? Now when I subtract 4 from both sides, think back to our rules for adding and subtracting radicals. Can you add 4, a whole number, to 10, a radical? No. So guess what? That's your answer. Understanding that these are 2 numbers. One of them is negative 4 plus whatever the square root of 10 is. The other one is negative 4 minus whatever the square root of 10 is, which is 3 point something something. Okay? But we're not going to be plugging that into a calculator and getting a decimal answer. We're just going to leave it in radical form. Make sense? Questions? Comments? Okay. Yes. Now you've got imaginary numbers that you're working with. Which is why we needed to learn that. By the way, if you ever come up with a concept that we've learned and you realize you really don't know it very well, you can go on YouTube and look for the videos because they're all still there. They're just not posted on the website.
You just stop. Like, you stop.
You can't put them together because one's got an I and one doesn't. Okay? So what we're going to do here is take the square root of both sides. Automatically, that means plus or minus. I've got x plus 4/5 over here. And Parker, what is the square root of negative 49? 7i. Okay? Now here's where you need to be careful. Yes, there's a fraction. What's the fraction in the x doing?
Adding.
Adding. Okay, how do you undo addition? You subtract. So x is equal to negative 4/5 plus or minus